everybody. My name is Dan Kennedy from Norton Fulbright's London office. We're here today as part of a video series brought to you by the Global Financial Restructuring and Insolvency Group at Norton Fulbright. I'm joined by my colleagues Camille Jojo and Daniel Ng in Hong Kong. We're going to talk to you today a little bit about the impact of the Evergrande situation and the potential knock-on effects to the market. Over to you, Camille.
Thank you, Dan, for the introduction. It's difficult to underestimate the importance of the real estate and construction sector to the overall economy in China. It represents approximately about 1/3 of GPD in China, and it was amongst the first sectors to recover after the global financial crisis in 2009, as there was a lot of stimulus put in by the central government. It can therefore be presumed that the sector also accounts for a significant proportion of the outstanding loans issued by Chinese banks. Global financial markets have therefore been on high alert ever since news of Evergrande's financial trouble surfaced recently. The property giant is regarded as one of the largest property companies in the world. It has more than 1,300 projects overall in more than 280 cities across China. And its businesses also encompass various other sectors, such as electric vehicle manufacturing. It did recently have a stake in a Shenzhen bank, which it sold, and also wealth management products. It has been reported that the outstanding indebtedness is a staggering $300 billion US, of which approximately $20 billion US is owed to offshore bondholders. So the preponderance of debt rests with mainland lenders. And that probably indicates where the solution to the financial woes will be focused. There have been multiple news reports that certain interest payments were made on the bonds during this 30-day grace period, but recently Evergrande defaulted on principal payments of, I think, approximately 82 million US and a guarantee obligation of approximately 260 million US dollars. There are also other bonds that are maturing, I think, in March, and therefore there will be an escalation of these potential defaults. The implications of this, I will hand over to my colleague Daniel to give further insight.
Thanks, Camille. I mean, obviously, the collapse of Evergrande would have a negative impact on China's economy, affecting not only 1.4 million property investors who have paid deposits for properties that are being built, construction companies and suppliers involved in the projects, but also on China's financial system, as Evergrande owes debt to hundreds of banks and financial firms. Any formal default can trigger cross-default provisions in other loans, and in turn, a credit crunch would be forthcoming where companies will struggle to borrow money and affect other businesses. This will have a domino effect on the Chinese economy, and some have speculated that Evergrande could represent the Lehman moment for China.
Thank you, Daniel. I can only wholeheartedly agree. I think the primacy for the mainland government is the protection of retail investors who have prepaid for a lot of these unbuilt apartments, and of course the suppliers and contractors that are very, very important to the economy. And therefore there has been concern about the impact of the company's financial and liquidity problems. There was one speculation that the mainland government would lend support to rescue Evergrande on the principle that it was too big to fail. Although officials did indicate in earlier press conferences that they would not step in to save Evergrande, as part of a wider strategy to send a message to all of the other property sectors where there has been unbridled lending and what we could only describe as a debt binge. And a lot of these speculative real estate ventures have made a lot of money for the property developers. But of course, it's created this over-leveraging, which has led to these problems. There is also concern about a knock-on effect with the whole of the property sector. And there have been reports recently of problems in the Kaiser Group, which is also facing potential defaults. However, the government understands the broader implications if it doesn't step in to orchestrate what I would say an orderly restructuring, particularly given that so much of the outstanding debt is owed to mainland lenders, and how this could impact the overall banking system, and not to mention consumer sentiment as well. Hence, to avoid the spillover effect on the financial system, and first and foremost to uphold social stability in the country, the government has joined hands with Evergrande by forming what could only be described as a risk management committee to help the company undergo an orderly restructuring. In this regard, 4 top representatives of state-owned enterprises have been co-opted onto the company's management committee, and these include important state-owned companies from China Cinda Asset Management, Guangdong Holdings, and Yuzhu Holdings. They represent 4 out of 10 of the management committee members. And this is a very encouraging sign that the orderly restructuring within mainland China will be supported by the state and provincial governments and the local courts. Priority will be put on Evergrande's retail investors, suppliers and contractors, with an aim to complete the 1.6 million uncompleted housing apartments, which in turn will obviously create value in order to avoid a systemic effect and a domino impact on the broader economy.
Thanks a lot, Camille. I mean, the forming of the committee does help instill market confidence, but do you think that the blow of China Evergrande will bring any negative impact on Hong Kong?
Well, in the worst case scenario, if an orderly restructuring does not ensue and there is a financial collapse of Evergrande and it goes into insolvency, it does seem to me that that crisis will be more of a domestic issue and be contained. And I say this because since the aftermath of the Asian financial crisis, which also heavily hit Hong Kong in 1997 onwards, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority imposed guidelines which capped the loan-to-value ratio for residential mortgages over 10 million Hong Kong dollars to 50%. And the aim of that was to deleverage and ensure that the property counters here would have a healthier balance sheet to avoid a crisis that we had during the Asian financial crisis. There's also been other anti-speculation measures imposed by the Hong Kong government in 2012, which include a further buyer's stamp duty of 15%, which was aimed to cool the market down. And I would say that a lot of these investors in Hong Kong are indeed mainland purchasers. And there is an off chance that if there was a financial collapse of Evergrande and a systemic impact in China, there might be a deleveraging exercise whereby mainland property owners in Hong Kong would have to sell off some of their assets to meet liabilities in China, which could potentially bring a potential knock-on effect. However, I don't envisage any significant impact in Hong Kong and would foresee that the property market always remains buoyant here because of the supply and demand. There is a very small land bank, but overwhelming demand for these apartments. So over to you, Dan. I hope that's a useful insight.
Thanks, Daniel and Camille. That was fantastically interesting. Look, it's very hard to see how a property company in the UK or even Europe could have such a potential impact on the market and the systemic effect. Our structures tend to be quite different. They tend to be standalone. But you know, the biggest property companies we have and the few failures that we've seen are fairly contained into, in the summer of 2020, a shopping centre operator is probably one of the more high profile failures here. They only had 4.5 billion of debt, which is small fry in comparison. But it'll be interesting to see how the market develops and how things pan out in Asia. So thanks for the insight, and thanks to everybody for joining us. This is part of a series of videos from the Norton Rose Financial and Restructuring Group. If you want to join us for other videos in this series, please take a look at nortonrosefulbright.com. Many thanks.